Welcome to Parev TV. This is a very special report of Parev TV, as this morning we heard the news of the clashes in the borders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, and a very special email came from the government of Armenia alerting me and the media, I guess, and very few lines that was sent to us was these: dear compatriots, earlier this morning Azerbaijan launched attacks along the entire Artsakh-Azerbaijani contact line. We will keep you updated with the latest information. Please follow and share the updates from our official channels. And now this email we got 5 hours ago, and today, at this very moment, we're joined by the Executive Director of the Armenian National Committee of America, Aram Hamparian, who's always been around to help us and inform us, give us information, give us guidance, give us whatever he can. Explain the situation. Aram, it's all yours. What is happening?
Well, first, let me say that the Armenian community in New Jersey, around the nation, all over the globe, we're all very fortunate to have you as a source of reliable and timely information. In times like this, knowing who we can trust is vital, and you're certainly at the top of the list. So we're deeply grateful for all that you're doing during times like this and year-round. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what we know is very similar to what you just mentioned here, which is that within the past 24 hours, Azerbaijan launched attacks along the line of contact between Azerbaijan and Artsakh, but also against population centers inside the perimeter of Artsakh, including Stepanakert. Those attacks were in the form of artillery, airstrikes, and also drone attacks. These are like kamikaze drones. We think that these were manufactured in Israel. It's not entirely clear at this point, but these are drones that have munitions on them, explosives on them, and they just target buildings, apartment complexes, people's homes, schools, hospitals. It's really a reckless attack on civilians. It's clear to us that this is a pre-planned attack, that this was coordinated. The very fact that Turkey and Azerbaijan had their messaging ready, I think even as the first bombs dropped, indicates that this was something that they had planned for some time. We've seen the result, at least on the Armenian side. We've heard as many as 16 killed, over 100 wounded. There's been an awful lot of Azerbaijani disinformation, misinformation, compounded by the fact that they've basically shut down social media within Azerbaijan. It's very hard for Azerbaijanis to comment on the issue. That may be because they're afraid of reports of casualties on their side. This may be a sign that Aliyev himself is not secure about his domestic political situation. In any event, we're pushing very hard here in Washington with the executive branch, the State Department, the White House, mostly Congress, though. Congress is, I think, where we're going to see the most responsiveness. The executive branch has a very, very bad habit. It's one that's shared with the OSCE, which is to be just generic, to be artificially even-handed, to exercise a type of false parity that calls on both sides to refrain from violence. I teach Armenian school on Sunday mornings, Vartan, and I taught a couple of classes this morning, and I said, when Pearl Harbor happened, they didn't call it a clash between the Japanese and American navies. They said this is an unprovoked surprise attack by one side against the other. We need to move into that realm in the media and in terms of the U.S. response. There's an item I'd like to share with you that's been very alarming, which is the level, the extent, the escalation of Turkish involvement in
that's what I wanted to get into next. Yes, please. So
oh yeah,
that's a very critical issue.
Yeah, Turkey is much more active this time around than they have been in the past. This may have actually had its start in Ankara, but there's heavy arms. There are fighters being flown into Azerbaijan from Turkey. Supporters of Turkey that have fought in Syria and Iraq and elsewhere. So we're very concerned about that, and we're following things very closely. We do have an action alert that folks can take advantage of. It's anca.org/alert, and with really just one click, Vakhan, we can send a letter to the president, to Vice President Biden, the two candidates running for office, to our 2 U.S. senators, no matter what state we're in, and also to our U.S. representative. Each message will be tailored to the appropriate target, but it's a very, very easy way to raise your voice. As today moves on and as we move into tomorrow, we'll have other options, including phone call options.
Aram, what is it that the Azerbaijani government is trying to achieve as a result of these attacks?
Sure. There are two theories that I think that make sense. One is more generous and one is less generous. The more generous interpretation is that they're lighting a fire under the Armenians, under Stepanakert and Yerevan, forcing Armenia to the peace table where they believe that Armenia will make concessions. So that's the more generous interpretation. The less generous is that this is simply an act of terror, that they want to so horrify, so terrorize the families of Artsakh that they decide that without schools, without hospitals, without roads, without even homes, that this is not a place that they can survive. That's literally the very definition of terrorism. So it's something between very, very aggressive bullying to force concessions or outright terrorism. And that's I think everything points in the direction of one of those, both of those, or maybe a combination.
How do you interpret Pashinyan's demand from the nation to mobilize, saying it's a martial law, I believe, or something? Did you hear that?
I think his statements speak to the heart of all Armenians, which is this is a moment where we must come together. I've always believed that there's always a lot of drama in the Armenian world and a lot of some pettiness at times, but on the core issues, we've always been united. If it's the freedom for Artsakh, security of Armenia, justice for the genocide, we lose sight of how united we are because I think of some sideshows. But days like this show that we're one team, Meg Oskenk, and I think that his statements reflect that, and they're received by a nation in Armenia and around the world that is very inclined to just put their shoulder to the wheel and help to defend our nation. We wouldn't be around 7,000 years if we didn't have that instinct. If that was not in our DNA, we would not be here today. So we will be Armenian.
Do you think this is a turning point in the 30-year war between Armenia and Azerbaijan? Will one side sit down and negotiate peace?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that. And any given escalation, and we've seen so many over the years, this one path is that it's a bump up, an escalation, then there's a decline, but over time there's a trend toward greater violence, especially since 2016, and then but in any one of those instances, it could be, in fact, that could be the spark that takes it to regional war. And by regional war, I mean a war that draws in Turkey, draws in Russia, potentially Iran, other countries. So I honestly, I can't pretend that I know. We do operate on the assumption that every one of these escalations is a potential war, and we operate on that assumption because we may hope for the best, but we certainly prepare for the worst. And we're like, our planning is based on worst case scenario, which, if you're Armenian, is a pretty sound basis for planning.
Aram, you know that we are dependent on different sources of news, depending where you turn. BBC, I repeat, Euronews, maybe CNN, and the social media. What would you advise Armenians to do or think about? What can we do? Which source should we go after? And what should be our response or reaction to all this? Because there is mass confusion out there.
Sure. Now, first of all, I'm a huge believer in the common sense of the Armenian people, and we know who to trust, and we know who is, selling us something, and who. When we get advice or news from people, I think we can tell the difference between those who care about us and want what's best for us, and those who are trying to play us. You are obviously in the category of people we trust, and that's because of decades of straight shooting, clear, timely information that you provided. And I think that's the standard that we have to apply, the filter that we have to apply. There's the Armenian Mirror Spectator, there's the Ospedus, there's the Weekly, trusted sources. But then, and this is where I'm going to sound a little paranoid about them, there are other sources that get money from somewhere. They get money from somewhere. They're not businesses, they're not making money, but they're spending money to sell news, to sell us their vision of the world or how they would like to see things. And it makes me wonder, right? They could just be super generous people who just want Armenians to know more about the world and more about politics and more about the region. Or it could be that they have an agenda. And actually, the more I read stuff coming out of Russia, stuff coming out of the United States, and other countries in the region, I always add the filter of, what do these people want? Is it normal that a media outlet with no self-sustaining mechanisms, no advertising, no subscriptions, is just present in the Caucasus just to provide information? I'm not sure that's the case. I think we really have to, in days like this, ask ourselves 3 or 4 times, why is this person reporting this? I mean, I will get information and receive a lot of information from US funded sources like Voice of America and Radio for Europe, but we can't ignore the fact that they have to answer to people. They're hired by people, they're paid by people. So I'm not saying you should dismiss what they say. I'm simply saying that we should view read everything through the filter of what agenda might be at play. And this is super important on days like this, because it's important that we have reliable information, and I think that your work is a stellar example of that, but there's a lot of other good stuff. Instead of giving you a list, although I will list you and Weekly Osmodas, Mirror Spectator, there's Zartunk Media, people can make their own list. That's my short list, and I'm sure I'm missing many others. The best thing is to say, use your common sense, use caution, and I think, as I said, the Armenians we're a bright bunch. We have a lot of common sense. I think we can figure it out.
You mentioned quite a few times, in days like these, what can we do in days like these? What can the average Armenian who's been listening to you, what can we do?
Okay, let me. I'll put it in this context. Here in Washington, we are talking to the White House, the State Department, also USAID, because there's an aid component potentially for this, but primarily with Congress, members of Congress, urging them to condemn the aggression, to call for a cut in military aid, to call for Azerbaijan to cease fire, and to warn Turkey to stop sending weapons and fighters to the region. Those are our 4 asks. So we're making these asks relentlessly in Washington, but they'll get taken seriously to the extent that legislators and politicians and policymakers believe that our community takes it seriously. So if on Monday morning, the State Department guys, legislators, senators, whoever, when they go to the office and they see that 6 Armenians weighed in over the weekend, they won't take it seriously, because they'll think we don't take it seriously. But if 600 have weighed in, believe me, that'll become a priority for Monday and the rest of the week, and we'll start seeing the kind of results that we need to see. So, the ANC has never really bought or rented our influence. We don't hire former speakers of the House like Dennis Hastert or Bob Livingston, those types, and we don't make huge PAC donations to politicians. We rely upon the human capital of our community. And when our folks step up and they go online, for example, anca.org/alert, if they were to go there, weigh in with the president, their senators, the U.S. representative, even Vice President Biden, so we have both candidates involved. If they do that sufficiently, in aggregate, we'll get taken very seriously, and our phone calls will get answered, and our requests will be honored.
How do you think this is going to play out? Give us an idea of what you think next day or two.
I honestly don't know, Martin. I have to say, we have been through this. We're old enough to.
It's a bit more serious. It seems this is a bit more serious.
Yeah, and I think that we have no choice, and this is exhausting for our community. I understand that. We have no choice but to operate on a worst case scenario. We have to assume that if there's 24 hours of aggression, then the next 24 hours might be even worse, and that the aerial attack will be complemented, let's say, by a ground invasion or other forms of violence. We have to assume that, and that's why we react so aggressively.
Initially, what I asked, or what you discussed, the fact that there is Turkey on one side, and how involved will Turkey get? For me, that's a major question of concern. That's a major concern. Will Turkey make a move in support of Azerbaijan? That, I think,
right.
You think it will? I don't think it will, but do you think it will?
I think that is very likely the central question of this escalation.
Because it could escalate. That's where the whole problem is. Russia.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, a couple of things. I would say that people will argue about Armenia's strength and Azerbaijan's strength, and different experts will say that Armenia has a defensive position and is better trained and more motivated. Others will say that Azerbaijan has sufficient weaponry, and that so there's an argument there's a debate about which is the more powerful military force and who has an advantage in an actual conflict. That's a discussion that's out there. But there's, even as people debate that argument, there's a general consensus that the two sides are within the same world. And but that all changes. That all changes when you bring Turkey into the equation.
Absolutely.
Turkey is the second largest army in NATO, the 16th largest economy in the world. They are a nation with 800 plus years of very aggressive actions, including many against Armenians. So that's profoundly dangerous, and very likely how I wouldn't say that Turkey's remained uninvolved based on any restraint on its part. It's probably been uninvolved more directly based on fear on its part, and that fear has less to do with Armenia and more to do with Russia. So
Absolutely.
There's a lot of geopolitics here, and the terrible situation is that we don't know all the details. We don't know what's in Erdogan's mind. We don't know what's in Putin's mind, or even Aliyev's mind, although he might be easier to read. We again have to look at how this might go off the rails, and how we can play a role as like a second army of the Armenian nation to step up for highest. And I know that there's a lot of analysis to be done. I'm less concerned about trying to game it out in terms of the game theory, in terms of what the next steps are, because I'm pretty sure I'll be wrong, and more inclined to say, how can we put our shoulder to the wheel today in the right places in terms of U.S. policy, and try to move this thing in the right direction.
Moments ago, the Ministry of Defense Armenia's announced that they had killed over 200 Azeris, destroying tanks, etc. My question is, Azerbaijan, Aliyev's government has also opposition within the country. And if they have really been beaten by the Armenian military, what kind of an instability can it cause within Azerbaijan?
Oh, I think that's a huge question, Vartan. First, let me say this. There's every soldier killed, every civilian killed, terrible tragedy. The mothers and fathers in Azerbaijan mourn their children just like Armenians mourn their children. They don't deserve to be killed in this war. But sadly, whether they're soldiers or civilians, it's essentially, these are victims of this Aliyev guys, this billionaires, this corrupt dictator's reckless ambition to take a free people and subject them to his foreign rule. It's like a recolonization, it's like a 18th century colonization effort in the 21st century. So these young men who are being killed and dying on both sides are victims of Aliyev. So that's number one. Number two, you hit the nail right on the head. The restraint on Azerbaijan's side is not an external restraint. Like, I don't think that there's much holding them back from attacking Armenia, except perhaps a fear of Armenia, or perhaps a fear of Russia, or maybe fear that Turkey won't back them up. But the internal restraint is, how might this ruin the Aliyev ATM machine, right? In a sense, the vast corruption and utter greed of this family is a factor that perhaps mitigates for peace, because as much as they may want war, as much as they may want to see the legacy of conquering and crushing Artsakh as the Aliyev legacy for decades to come, what they really don't want is for this clan, the Pashayevs and the Aliyevs, to lose access to the vast oil wealth of the country. And so that's the interesting thing. And we've seen before in Azerbaijan that losses on the battlefield have led to changes of leadership. And that's how Aliyev came to power. Aliyev, the father, Ilham's father, Haidar. So I think those lessons have not been lost in Ilham. So he probably wants to push the aggression as far as he can, but not so far that it jeopardizes his leadership.
Aram Hamparian, this was an unplanned program of Parev TV. Our intention is to reach out to the community, give them as much information as possible, as you said, reliable information, Is there anything in closing?
Just a thank you. I mean, you know, there are a lot of Armenians out there who are doing a lot of stuff online now, and they've done it for a day, a week, or a month, and I applaud each and every one of them. But you have been doing this for decades. That type of service is rare, and it deserves our great respect.
Aram, thank you very much for joining us and enlightening us. And we wish you ANCA all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vartan.